He used to joke that life had a sense of humor so dark it should come with a warning label. But somewhere between losing his job, his apartment, and the last person willing to loan him money, the joke stopped being funny. By the time the letter came, he and his 6-year-old son were sleeping in the back of a broken-down van behind an old supermarket, the nights hot and airless, the smell of garbage seeping in through cracked windows. He had one fan left in the world, a tired social worker who sometimes slipped them grocery vouchers, and even she couldn't do much more than pat his arm and say she was trying. So when a volunteer at the shelter tapped his shoulder and said, "Someone left this for you," he almost laughed at the sight of the envelope. It looked out of place in his hands, heavy cream-colored paper, his full name written in careful ink that didn't wobble or smudge. No return address, no logo of an agency or court, just his name and a small, unfamiliar town stamped in the corner. His son, Noah, watched with wide, serious eyes from the cracked plastic chair across from him, hugging their threadbare backpack like it might be taken if he blinked. "What is it, Dad?" Noah asked, voice hushed the way children speak in hospitals and shelters, places where grown-up trouble hangs thick in the air. "Probably a bill that forgot I'm broke," he said automatically, then regretted the sarcasm as soon as he saw Noah's face fall. "Hey, I'm kidding." He softened his tone. "Let's find out." He slid a finger under the seal and unfolded the single sheet inside. A law firm's name sat at the top, all sharp letters and authority. His eyes skimmed past the formal phrases until they snagged on a cluster of words that didn't feel real. "You have been named sole beneficiary. Property, including lake and adjacent land, previously owned by your late great-uncle?" A name he recognized dimly surfaced, an old relative his father had argued with more than spoken about. The letter went on. The property in question, known locally as Miller's Lake, is considered of negligible value due to its polluted state and history as an informal dumping ground. Nevertheless, ownership has passed to you. Please contact our office to acknowledge receipt. He read that line twice. Polluted. Dumping ground. Negligible value. His stomach sank, equal parts disappointment and anger. Of course, even when life tossed him something, it came with rust and warnings. A junk lake, a place people threw away things they were done with. The irony didn't escape him. "Did we get a house?" Noah asked, hopeful sparks lighting in his eyes. "Not exactly," his father said, forcing a tired smile. "We got a lake." "A lake?" Noah's eyes widened. "Like water and fish and boats?" "More like mud and trash and regrets," he muttered before he could stop himself. Noah's face flickered. The father exhaled, rubbed his temples, then leaned forward. "Look, buddy, I don't know what it really is yet. They say it's no good, but it's something with our name on it. That's more than we've had in a while, right?" Noah nodded slowly. "Can we see it?" The question hung between them, fragile and full of possibility. It would have been easier to crumple the letter, toss it in the overflowing trash can, and focus on the next free meal, the next night's shelter bed. Easier to assume the professionals were right. The lake was worthless, a bad joke dressed as inheritance. But there was a stubborn place inside him that refused to keep saying no to every slight chance the world held out. "Yeah," he said finally, surprising himself with the certainty in his own voice. "Yeah, We can. The lawyer turned out to be kinder than the letterhead suggested. When they called from the shelter phone, she sounded startled he'd actually responded. Most of his extended family, she explained, had ignored their notices for years. Your great-uncle was difficult, she admitted delicately. He lived alone out there, very private man, but he was clear about this. The lake and land go to you, no conditions. I have the deed ready. Is there a house? He asked. Cabin? Technically, yes, she said, then hesitated. But it's barely standing. The place has been used as a local dumping spot for decades. Old tires, scrap metal, broken furniture. Kids sneak out there at night. The county wanted to condemn it, but before that went through, your great-uncle updated his will. So it's a mess, he said, legally and literally. Pretty much, she agreed. But it's your mess now, if you want it. He looked at Noah sitting on the floor nearby, drawing crooked fish in a donated coloring book, his tongue peeking from the corner of his mouth in gentle concentration. Out the window, the parking lot shimmered in the heat. The van sat there like a metal oven. Their future, as far as he could see, was a dotted line of overheated days and sleepless nights. A junk lake didn't sound much worse. We'll take it, he said. Getting there took almost everything they had. They sold the van for scrap, pocketed just enough for bus tickets and a cheap second-hand tent, just in case the cabin falls on your head. The volunteer at the thrift store joked. Noah treated the trip like an adventure, pressing his nose to the bus window, narrating every cow and river as if discovering a new world. His father watched the miles roll by with a knot in his stomach, torn between cautious hope and the familiar dread of being disappointed again. By the time they reached the small town named in the letter, the air felt different, heavy with humidity, scented with pine and algae, and something earthy that hinted at water nearby. The lawyer's office sat above a bakery that smelled like memories he couldn't afford. She was younger than he expected. Hair pulled back, sleeves rolled up as if she'd been doing 3 jobs at once. She slid a thin stack of papers across the desk, explaining each one patiently, without condescension. This, she said, tapping the top document, is the deed. It confirms the lake, the land around it, and the old structures are legally yours. No mortgage, no lien. Just back taxes, but they're small. Nobody valued the place much. Do you? He asked before he could stop himself. She paused, considering. I grew up here, she said. We used to dare each other to sneak down to the water at night. My mother said the lake was cursed, but really, it was just neglected. People dump what they don't want where nobody's watching. Over time, everyone forgets what was there before the trash. She handed him a small metal key on a tarnished ring. This is for the gate at the main access road. There's an old boathouse, but I'd be careful going inside. The boards are rotten. He rolled the key between his fingers, its edges warm from her hand, cool from his. It was the first key with his name attached in years. Is there anything else I should know? He asked. The lawyer hesitated, then sighed. Only this. Your great-uncle wasn't crazy, but he was convinced the lake had value. Not in the way the county saw value, but in some stubborn private way. He fought every attempt to fill it in or sell it for development. Said the place was not done yet. That's the phrase he used. Maybe it was just pride. Maybe it was something else. I don't know. As they left the office, Noah clutched his hand tightly. Do you think he left us treasure? The boy asked, eyes bright. Treasure's usually more trouble than it's worth, his father said, then corrected himself. But maybe he left us something better than this. He gestured vaguely toward the street, the tired storefronts, the peeling paint, the way people's eyes slid off them like they were used to strangers not staying. Somewhere to breathe. The road out to the lake started paved and ended in a rattle of gravel and dust. Trees crowded closer as they walked. The sun filtered into speckled light that danced across Noah's hair. Cicadas hummed in the branches, a thick, buzzing chorus. Buddy, who had ridden under their feet on the bus and bounded free the moment they stepped off, darted ahead, nose twitching, tail whipping back and forth like a flag of cautious joy. When they reached the gate, it was exactly as the lawyer described. Rusted, leaning, padlocked more out of habit than real security. The key fit, grinding reluctantly before turning with a clunk that sounded louder than it should in the quiet afternoon. Beyond the gate, the road sloped gently downwards, surrounded by tall grass that brushed Noah's knees and his father's shins. The smell of water grew stronger. Algae, wet wood, something faintly sour. It stinks, Noah said, wrinkling his nose. Yeah, his father agreed. Lakes get like that when nobody cares for them. The first glimpse of water came through a break in the trees, a dark, sluggish expanse dotted with floating debris, ringed by reeds and old tires, half swallowed by mud. Closer to the shore, the remains of a wooden dock slouched into the murk, boards warped and missing. A sagging boathouse leaned perilously over the water, its reflection trembling in the ripples, like it wasn't sure if it belonged in this world or the one below. On the opposite bank, a rusted refrigerator lay on its side amid other forgotten appliances, their shapes softened by moss and time. Noah's shoulders drooped. It's ugly, he said quietly. The father swallowed disappointment and forced himself to see beyond the surface. Yes, it was ugly. Yes, it was a mess. But it was also quiet, removed from traffic and sirens, edged with trees instead of alleys. The sky overhead was wide and unbroken. No landlord could tell them to leave. It's ours, he said, putting as much warmth into the words as he could. Ugly or not, that's something. Noah considered that, squinting at the water. Can we make it less ugly? Maybe, he said. It'll take work. Work. He wasn't sure he knew how to do. He'd never cleaned a lake, never negotiated with mud and memories. But he'd done harder things, gotten sober, stayed sober, learned how to apologize to a child for things he couldn't fix. Maybe this would be like that. Messy, slow, but possible. They explored the shoreline cautiously, stepping over broken glass and scrap metal, warning Noah away from unstable ground. Buddy bounded along the edge, occasionally splashing into the shallows with a delighted yelp before leaping back when the mud sucked at his paws. They found the remains of old picnic tables, a fire pit choked with beer cans, graffiti sprayed across a cluster of rocks, names, dates, crude jokes, ghosts of other people's nights. Did Great Uncle live here? Noah asked. Somewhere near, his father replied, scanning the tree line. The lawyer had mentioned a small cabin on the west shore. It took them another 20 minutes of walking to find it, tucked back from the water beneath a stand of pines, half hidden by undergrowth. The cabin looked like it was losing an argument with gravity, Roof sagging, porch boards warped, one window cracked into a spiderweb of lines. But it was still standing. 4 walls, a door, a roof that only leaked in some places, to a man whose recent ceiling had been the van's metal shell, and before that, whatever overpass they'd slept under, it looked almost royal. They tested each step on the porch before trusting it with their weight. The door complained, but opened. Inside, dust motes floated in shafts of light from 2 small windows. A narrow bed frame crouched against one wall, mattress long gone. A table tilted in the center of the room, one leg shortened by rot. Shelves held the fossilized remains of canned goods. On one wall, a row of hooks bore an empty nail where something important had once hung. Noah spun slowly in place. "It's like a clubhouse," he said, wonder seeping into his voice despite the decay. "A really old, dirty clubhouse." "We'll clean it," his father said, surprising himself with the certainty. "We'll make it ours." He pictured patching the roof with reclaimed shingles, sanding the table, teaching Noah how to hammer nails straight, how to read the grain of wood. He imagined evenings with the door open, lake breeze rolling in, the 3 of them sitting on that repaired porch watching fireflies instead of traffic. Standing in the center of the cabin, with dust gently settling and the lake murmuring outside, he felt something he hadn't in a long time, like the world might actually let him build instead of just survive. Noah ran to the window and pressed his face to the dirty glass. "Dad, look," he said, pointing toward the far side of the lake. "What's that shiny thing?" His father stepped beside him, squinting. Across the water, near the cluster of rusted appliances, something metallic caught the sun, winking at them through reeds and trash. It was too bright to be more junk, too deliberate somehow in the way it flashed when the breeze shifted. "Probably just more trash," he said. But the words came out softer than his doubt. Noah frowned thoughtfully. "It's in the same place every time the wind moves," he said, more to himself than anyone. "Like it's not floating, like it's stuck there." His father looked at him with a mix of pride and unease. The boy had always noticed things other people overlooked. A coin on a sidewalk, a loose bolt in a playground ladder, the way his father's smile didn't reach his eyes on bad days. "We'll check it out tomorrow," he said. The day had already burned through most of their strength. They needed to set up the tent outside in case the cabin's roof collapsed during the night, unpack what little food they had, find a spot to boil water. Practical things. "But what if someone takes it?" Noah persisted, still staring across the lake. "Nobody's been taking anything from here for a long time," his father answered. "That's the problem." Yet the way the light kept catching on that distant gleam made a small knot of curiosity form in his chest, tight enough that he knew he wouldn't sleep easily until he knew what it was. Later, as dusk settled like a soft bruise over the water and the sounds of the town faded into crickets and the occasional splash from the lake, they sat on the broken steps of the cabin, sharing a can of beans and a stale roll. Buddy sprawled at their feet, belly full, eyes half closed. Fireflies stitched brief, glowing lines above the grass. "Dad?" Noah asked quietly. "Do you think Great-Uncle was lonely here?" He watched the lake's dark surface, the faint suggestion of stars above it. "Yeah," he said honestly. "I think he was, but I also think he was waiting for something. maybe for us. Noah leaned his head against his shoulder. Then we shouldn't waste it, he murmured. The father stared across the water to where that faint, metallic glint still hid among shadows and reeds. The lake was a mess, yes, but beneath the trash, beneath the years of neglect, there was a shape he couldn't quite see yet, a story half buried, waiting for someone stubborn or desperate enough to dig. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he might be exactly that kind of man. He tightened his arm around his son and whispered, more to himself than to Noah, "Tomorrow, we see what this lake is really hiding." Morning rose warm and hazy, the kind of summer light that softened everything it touched. The trees, the broken porch, even the weary lines on the father's face. The lake shimmered like spilled glass, perfectly still, except for the occasional ripple from hidden fish. For the first time since arriving, the place felt less hostile, almost welcoming, as if it wanted them to stay a little longer. Still, beneath that gentle glow, the father felt something coiled inside him. Not fear, not dread, but a quiet tension, like the air before a storm. He stirred the pot of oatmeal over the tiny camp stove he'd found in the cabin. The smell wasn't much, but it reminded him of the mornings before life fell apart. The boy sat on the steps, kicking his bare legs and humming to himself. Buster, their loyal mutt, lay nearby, panting softly. "Dad?" the boy finally asked. "We're going back there. Today, right? To the shiny thing?" His father nodded. "Yes. We'll check it out, but we're going to be careful. There could be sharp metal or broken glass. I'll watch where I step," the boy promised, nodding so earnestly it made the father smile, despite himself. They ate, quietly at first, then with small bits of conversation. Birds they heard during the night, the way the cabin creaked like an old man turning in his sleep. How the lake looked stranger at night than it did at sunrise. The father found himself glancing at the opposite shore again and again. The memory of that strange metallic glint had sat with him all night, like a stubborn shadow. Not garbage, not scrap metal. Something else. Something that didn't belong. "Dad," the boy said between bites, "what if it's something important, not just junk?" "We'll find out," the father answered. "Could be anything. An old box. A part of a boat. Something somebody forgot." But in truth, the father didn't believe that. People didn't bury shiny metal boxes in lake muck for no reason. And old men didn't send letters claiming inheritance unless they carried secrets on their backs. The path took almost an hour, longer than expected. They had to weave through thick reeds, hop over fallen logs, and zigzag around rusted piles of debris, an abandoned tire here, a crushed metal barrel there. Some things looked as if they'd been dumped decades ago. Others, more recently, a graveyard of careless decisions. Once they even passed the skeleton of an old motorcycle, half buried in sand, the wheel crooked like a broken limb. "People abandon weird stuff," the boy muttered, frowning at it. "People forget things," the father corrected gently, "and sometimes they stop caring." "We care," the boy said. "Right, Dad?" He paused, looked at his son's face, young, hopeful, too good for the life they'd been forced into. "Yes," he said quietly. "We do." The lake whispered beside them, tiny waves slapping at reeds like soft claps. A dragonfly zipped past, wings glittering. But despite the beauty, the closer they got, the thicker the father felt the air grow around him. like stepping into a room full of secrets. Finally, they reached the spot. What they saw wasn't random garbage. It was a graveyard. An entire corner of the lake seemed to have collected metal and wood as if the water itself had hoarded it. Rusted sheets of steel leaning against each other like ancient shields, tangled fishing nets, old barrels, a boat skeleton, half swallowed by the mud. Everything looked forgotten, except the shining piece that had caught the father's eye yesterday. Up close, it was unmistakable. The corner of a metal chest. The surface was too clean, too intact. No rust, no peeling, no cracks, as if the lake had protected it instead of destroying it. "Dad," the boy whispered, stepping closer. The man grabbed his shoulder gently. "Careful. Let's take it slow." He crouched, brushing away the tangled weeds that clung to the metal. With every handful pulled aside, more of the chest appeared. Clean lines, sharp corners, surprisingly smooth panels. This wasn't something someone lost or forgot. It had been hidden. The father dug his hands deeper into the muck, loosening the suction of wet sand. Buster barked anxiously behind him, tail stiff, fur raised slightly. "It's okay, boy," the father murmured. But even he felt uneasy, not scared, but aware that this was not normal. Together, he and his son heaved. Mud churned, water splashed. The chest shifted with a deep sucking sound, like the earth didn't want to let go. One last push. And the chest rolled free onto the grassy bank. They both stood for a moment, catching their breath. The sunlight struck the side of the chest, hitting it at just the right angle, and for a second, the father swore he saw something move beneath the reflection, a symbol etched into the metal. He knelt, wiped it clean. There it was, engraved deliberately, with purpose, a circle, a diagonal slash. Beneath it, 1906. The boy crouched beside him, unable to blink. "Dad, it's really old?" "Yeah, it is. And it's locked." "Yes." The father touched the lock. It wasn't rusted. It wasn't even cold like a normal metal lock. It felt preserved. He tried his knife, nothing. Tried a stone, zero effect. Then the boy pointed. "Dad, those are numbers." The father leaned closer, and there, almost hidden beneath grime, was a small rotating combination dial. 3 digits. The year, the engraving, the clue. The boy breathed. "Try it." The father exhaled slowly, fingers trembling despite himself. He wiped the dirt away, revealing the tiny notches. 1, 2, 3, 4. Click. Silence. Then the lock dropped open. Effortless. The father froze. The boy pressed closer. "Dad, open it." The father lifted the lid slowly, as though something inside might break from sudden movement. The hinges didn't groan, didn't creak. They opened like the chest had been oiled yesterday. Inside was a tightly wrapped oilcloth bundle. "Careful," the father murmured, even though he didn't know what he was being careful for. He unrolled it. Documents. Old but immaculate. Sealed. Labeled. Stamped. Official looking. Not money. Not jewelry. Not gold. But something far more dangerous. The top folder read, "Geological Report. Confidential." The father's heartbeat stumbled. Date, 1934. Signatures of surveyors. Maps of the region. Cross-sections of underground layers. He flipped rapidly, unable to stop. Then he froze on a page that made the world around him fall quiet. A list that didn't belong in an old lake chest. Titanium, rare earth minerals, gold-bearing quartz, uranium traces. Another folded map slid into his lap. Red circle, thick marks, coordinates. He recognized the lines instantly. The lake, these woods, this land, their land, and inside that red circle were 2 words written in bold ink. Primary vein. He couldn't breathe for a moment. The boy watched him with wide, trusting eyes. Dad, is it important? The father swallowed hard. Son, this might be worth a fortune. Millions, maybe more. The boy blinked. So? We're rich? I don't know yet. But this is something real. Something someone hid. He looked at the chest again. Someone didn't just drop this. Someone buried it. Someone wanted it gone, forgotten, erased. Yet his grandfather had left him a letter, a key, an instruction, a direction. Why? The father stood slowly, looking across the water. The lake no longer felt like a quiet, abandoned place. It felt alive, watching, waiting. Whatever his grandfather had been involved in, he hadn't wanted it to die with him. Dad, are we in trouble? The boy asked quietly. The father knelt, pulling his son close. No, but things might get complicated. Because of the papers? Yes, because someone might come looking for them. He closed the chest, locked it again, lifted it with both hands. Heavier now, not physically, but with meaning. They began the long walk back to the cabin. The father felt something shift inside him. An invisible line crossed. Life had been one thing yesterday, but now it had split in 2, the life before the chest and the life after. And as they walked, he felt both hope and danger. Second chances don't come quietly. They come with weight, responsibility, and a path forward that demands courage. The boy reached for his father's free hand. We're going to be okay, right? The father squeezed his fingers gently. Yes, he whispered. We're going to be okay. I don't know how yet, but God didn't bring us here for nothing. Buster barked once, as if agreeing. The lake rippled behind them, and the father knew. Whatever lay ahead, someone, somewhere, was about to realize the chest wasn't lost anymore. Night came down over the lake, like a slow-moving curtain, settling heavy and blue over the trees, the water, and the small cabin that barely held itself together. The father couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, chest on the floor beside him, the maps and documents neatly rewrapped. His son lay curled under blankets, safe, dreaming softly. The father watched the boy's small chest rise and fall. Every breath reminded him what mattered. The chest could change their lives, but anything powerful enough to lift a man from poverty was powerful enough to destroy him too. He whispered a quiet prayer, the kind he hadn't said in years. Lord, guide me. Let me do right by him. The air felt lighter afterward. Just before dawn, he stepped outside. The lake steamed gently in the early light, and the world felt untouched. Buster padded beside him, nose twitching. The father stood still for a long time, trying to understand what his grandfather had wanted him to see. This land held secrets, valuable ones, but it also held a legacy he never knew existed, a legacy someone had tried to bury. By the time the sun fully rose, he had made his decision. He went into town for the first time. It was a small place, quiet, with a diner, a hardware store, 2 antique shops, and a real estate office. People looked at him sideways, his clothes worn, his beard messy, his backpack stuffed with the chest hidden inside. But one man didn't look away. An older surveyor stood outside the real estate office, hat tipped back, sunburnt, seasoned. His truck carried tools and soil testing equipment. A man who knew land, a man who knew history. Help you find something? he asked. The father exhaled. Maybe. I inherited a property across the lake. I need someone honest to tell me what's under it. The man raised a brow. Under it? Yes. Minerals, veins, tunnels, old survey reports. Now the surveyor's expression sharpened, turning careful. Why don't we step inside? They did. Inside the office, over coffee, the father showed him the documents. Not all of them. Not the map with coordinates. But enough to make the surveyor choke on his drink. Where did you get this? The man whispered. My grandfather left it behind. The surveyor leaned back slowly, eyes wide. Son, this report was sealed decades ago. Mining companies fought over these veins before the state blocked the area. Whoever hid this didn't want anyone to touch the land again. Is it real? Real enough to build a future on. Real enough to make enemies too. The father's stomach tightened. I don't want trouble. I want safety for my boy. The surveyor studied him, the torn jacket, the exhausted eyes, the sincerity. What do you want me to do? Tell me how to protect it legally, how to register it, how to keep it ours. The surveyor nodded. Then we'll do it the right way. Paperwork, signatures, state filings, verification of inheritance, land deeds, mineral rights, transfers. The process took weeks, but not once did the father waver. His son played by the lake, fished from the dock, collected stones that glittered in the sun. Sometimes he'd run to his dad with a handful of bright quartz, shouting, "Look, gold!" The father would smile. "Someday, buddy, someday." When the final mineral rights claim was approved, the surveyor shook his hand firmly. Congratulations. You're no longer just a landowner. You're holding the most valuable undeveloped vein in the region. The father felt his knees weaken. Months ago, he and his son were sleeping behind dumpsters. Now he owned something worth millions. But more importantly, he owned hope. He didn't sell the land. Not yet. He leased it. A mining company offered him a contract. Fair, ethical, sustainable. He negotiated protections for the lake, for the forest, for the cliffside cabin. He asked for a small home to be built nearby. Nothing fancy, just safe. They agreed. By the end of summer, he and his boy moved into their new home overlooking the water. Not luxury, peace. At dinner one evening, his son climbed into his lap. Dad, are we rich now? The father kissed the boy's hair, breathing in the smell of sun and grass and childhood. We're blessed, he said softly. That's better than rich. Because of the chest? The father looked out the window at the lake, glowing gold in sunset. No, he whispered, because God didn't forget us, because we kept walking, because we didn't give up. The boy smiled, resting his head against his chest. Outside, wind rippled across the lake. Gently, like a hand smoothing everything into calm. The father felt tears burn behind his eyes. They weren't tears of pain this time. They were something new, something bright. The world hadn't beaten him. It had led him home. And somewhere deep in the water, the place where the chest had been, remained quiet, its secret finally given to the right hands. The right father, for the right son. Their new life had just begun.